Okay, everybody, welcome to our final class of the Magica um, Grimoire Studies series. And so as a special guest, a special gift, we're giving you that décolletage shot. um, and I have so much tonight that I want to try and squeeze into this class that I want to start off by saying, while the course itself, the course material ends because the book ends, this is a conversation that's going to go on for quite a while. Now, I will be, for those who are watching live or watching in the proximity of June 11th, 2023, I am going to take my first holiday, my first vacation in 3 years. It's a staycation. I'm not going anywhere to the best of my knowledge, but I am going to take some time off to take care of some other things that I'd like to do. But I'll be gone from next week ish until the first week in August, when we'll start back with my classes. Now, while I'm gone, the other instructors still have their classes going on, and I apologize that with what we have happening in the Inner Alchemy community, with the platform and with other things that are coming, we won't be able to give the normal 6 weeks of break time, of catch up time, that we interspersed through last year. This year, it's all going to be compressed into the 4 weeks that I'm away. But that doesn't mean you can't catch up. It doesn't mean that, you can't say, hey, I'm not going to start the class live, class live with them. Everything, we're tweaking all of this so that more of the content is done pre-recorded. And then we have discussions live. And the discussions live will be a little broader, if you could talk about whatever one of the classes that you want to talk about, or magical principles in general, or actual application. So I'll start with the first thing that's coming, so that everybody knows this is the first time I'm actually sharing it. And I didn't have the presence of mind to do it with notes, but we're working on something that still has to be fleshed out. It's one of the things I'm doing on my break, where those who've been part of the platform up until this time will have a special benefit as charter members, because I've already fostered relationships with most of you, that will allow you, and possibly in the future, I don't know, we may expand this, but it'll give you 30 minutes credit. So imagine nothing else changes. It's the same courses, the same access, the same platform, but your membership will give you 30 minutes credit that you can either use once a month to do a one-on-one with me, or you can accumulate like 3 credits and then do an hour and a half with me, which could be either for a reading, it could be for counseling, it could be for coaching. That's those 3 areas, or just, questions about a particular course that you just really want to dive in deep and you don't want to talk about it live. And the reason we're doing that, even though these are a lot of things that we've done throughout the time that we've had this school, the reason we're doing it this way is because there are folks who are watching right now who haven't been able to be with us live in almost a year because of their work schedule. The pandemic kind of shifted things for them, and now their schedules don't quite work with ours. There's some people who, like Megan is all the way in Hawaii. We've got Larissa in China. So we have this global community. But if I make myself available a certain number of hours each day, some of those folks can maybe still connect with me, and we could still do some one-on-one, because I feel intuitively like there's some folks who really have questions, and they're getting frustrated that they can't be here live, and their questions continue to go unanswered, and they don't have time or don't want to put it in writing. Now you'll have it away, and it's going to work out really well, because if you're just getting 30 minutes credit each month, and you accumulate as much as you think you're going to need for a session, then it's fair. Then it's like shares rather than okay, you got to get with me before the month's over, and then that's not gonna help people to catch up. So I'm excited about that. Um, we've got a couple things happening in July. July 25th, I'm going to be on Leilani's. I can't think of what the name of her show is. It's a magical something. But just watch the group, and I'll post. I'm going to be on her podcast. We're going to be talking in depth about entheogens and the use of entheogens in magic, and whatever else she wants to ask me about. The 26th of July is going to be the last season episode of The Brew. And as those of you who saw last episode, unfortunately, I won't be there. But I have heard that Michael's talking to Zia Angelina, and she will be there to do the Pride episode. So we can look forward to that. We were going to do it where I was there and Angelina was there. And then I just said, what are we, the Donnie Marie show? I don't have the energy to do split screens and pre-record. And so I'm going to be, I'll have started my vacation. And so I won't be around. So happy Pride to everybody. But Zia Angelina will be there with Michael for that episode. And then when I get back in the first week of August, a couple things are going to happen. One is we're going to start off the new semester with, or the semester starts in September, but in August, we're going to have a couple live Q&As where people can ask questions about whatever the material is that they were wrapping up over the last 4 to 6 weeks. And so it'll be on this platform. It'll be alive. We're going to be at that time, I'll tell people in more detail, but the sort of seminary training program for the ones who want to be part of the contemplative order and do the work with women's reproductive rights and gender affirming care and all that, we finally have a separate platform for them through Google Grants. And so I'm really excited that I can kind of move that out of here. So this remains what it was intended to be. But, we're grateful to have been able to provide the space. And then in the beginning of September, I'll start the new course that I am so excited for. It will be the only course that you absolutely will have to have a background in esotericism and magic. Doesn't matter what type of magic, but it's going to be folk magic oriented. And it's going to be a folk magic oriented approach or a folk magic oriented course that is taking a trauma informed approach to magical practice and esotericism. It's something that I've wanted to teach from the beginning, but felt like we needed to all have at least a sort of a common parlance, a common ground through the tradition that I come from, so that when I say a word, you know what it means. You may not use that word, you may not use that particular practice, but you'll say, aha, I know that when he does that, like we'll say, warding against the evil eye. So you know that when John Michael's talking about Maloikyo, that might be mal de ojo for somebody who's Spanish, or that might be or Hispanic, that might be Nazur for somebody who's Persian, and your practice can remain the same. So it's going to be, it won't be a place for people who have never indulged in or pursued any kind of magical practices, but it will be very welcoming to those who are beginners, who are just stepping on the path. Maybe they're still trying to find their way. So I'm excited about that, because that is what my publisher wants me to, the company that's pitching me to let them be my publisher instead of self-publishing as we've done for the last year and a half. They want me to write a book for them based on this. And I'm feeling like everything's pointing to yes on that. And in order to be absolutely certain, I'm going to teach a course on it, and I'll know immediately. If I teach a course on it and it just feels like this is, my passion is there, then I'll write the book on it. And I think it's just going to be the course, regardless of whether I write the book, is going to be some really good stuff. because it's going to give people postmodern context to apply their magical practice, to stay connected to their ancestral practices, but also to take some of the wisdom that we have that we so often overlook, that it's easy to overlook when you're engaging a magical practice, and say, hey, how can I take these things and incorporate them into a magical practice? And we've been working with a group of people, like sort of as pilot subjects, for some study on this, and the results are blowing my mind. They're just so, I'm so happy and so grateful. So that's all the announcements, and now we'll dive into to the material. There's not really a lecture for this last section, but as I said in the book, when we talk about about healing afflictions, that was the hardest chapter in the book for me to write, because I know from personal experience, when I was, in 1983, 40 years ago, 39 years ago, no, 40 years ago, when I first started to come across some of this esoteric material that my uncle gave me, that was based on Hermeticism, but not the Kabbalion, on like older texts of Hermeticism. And he was explaining these things to me. I had a pretty good sense that I got it, that I understood what he was saying. And then I met a pop culture new thought teacher, who played a big role in saving my life at that time after my sexual assault, and whom I love. She's left the planet, and I still have great respect for her. But her the way her teachings came across, and the framework of her religion, were resulting in people like a close friend of mine committing suicide, because she was telling him he wasn't doing the work to heal the cancer lesions that he had from AIDS. And so for a period of time, I kind of shut all of that down. I understood how to do it for me, and I could teach those who were closest to me, but I didn't want to be responsible for somebody mistaking the idea of having 100% responsibility for the experiences in your life, but still recognizing that biology plays a role, that we are still in this, meat sack, where all these organisms are working together. And so I'm going to start from reminding everyone of the framework of essential unity. And so whatever affliction is happening to you is happening to me. It's happening to all of us that are here. It's happening to the cosmos. And so I just think that's so cute that were you just spraying them? Bless their hearts. So if we are one, then we have to kind of come from a slightly different perspective. So when we talk about people who say, oh, I feel like there's an evil spirit attacking me, we have to unpack what that really means, because it's not always necessarily it's not even necessarily an actual entity that's attacking you. It could also be your mind. And that's just as real as an external entity, because remember, the word external, that's a perception. So we have to really get to the roots of it. So this material should not be interpreted as a cure. It should not be interpreted as a way to diagnose why you have certain symptoms. It's not got therapeutic benefits. It's a way of getting to know yourself and reclaim your power. Because at the end of the day, healing is nothing more but coming back into your power. Because if essential unity is real, then there is nothing that needs to be cured or healed. There is a philosopher in Tibet whose name was Milarepa, and Milarepa said, if a cure exists, why worry? If none exists, what good is worrying? So it comes from sort of that foundational practice of recognizing that you are whole, that you are one with the universe and with source, and that when we have experiences, if they're experiences of affliction, and I chose that word instead of illness or dis-ease, although both of those really work, particularly dis-ease. I mean, when I use the word disease, I usually hyphenate it so people are reminded, even if for a second, that it's a lack of ease in the body. you're holding a lack of ease. So that's a lot easier to focus your attention on than saying, well, how do I get rid of cancer? How do I get rid of this? Because your objective is not to get rid of those things. Your objective is to reclaim the power, reclaim the balance, the homeostasis. So when we're talking about an affliction, we're just talking about the same thing that religious people in the Abrahamic traditions call sin. Sin isn't like, there's not a list for real of things that source says you can't do this, can't do this, can't do this, can't do this. And if you do, they're sins. Like that would really have been an easier life for all of us if there was just a list to follow, but there's not. Sin is when you imagine there's anything you can do that would separate you from source and therefore from one another or from the planet or from spirit or from your ancestors. And so it's a delusion. That's all and I don't personally like to use the word sin because I just think it's got horrible connotations of colonial, colonization and imperialism and manipulation and misogyny and all of that. But that's what disease is as well. That's what an affliction is. An affliction is imagining there's something you could do that separates you from source, which is health, which is vitality, which is love, which is forward movement. And it's the easiest way I can explain it is outside of my tradition. In I think it was the early 80s, a group of folks were channeling a document, a new way of, or new philosophy that came to be known as A Course in Miracles. And the fundamental tenet of A Course in Miracles is whatever is not love is fear. So there are only two, energetic forces going on, primal forces going on in the world at any time, in any situation, and that's either love or fear. So when you're rooted in love, and love is another word for source. So when you're rooted in source, when you recognize essential unity, then the experiences you have, you can take 100% responsibility for them, because you could say, aha, I've got a headache right now. I wonder what that means. Why am I holding the tension? Where am I holding the tension? And what is the thing that I need to release? What's the belief? What's the fear? And I promise you, if I stopped the class tonight at this and people just said, whatever's going on in my life, I got to figure out what I'm afraid of and release it, and the disease or the affliction goes away, it would be, that would be worth everything that you spent all this time in the course for, because it works. It's incredible how it works. And it's at the root of all the counseling, the private counseling that I do. But there are techniques you could do. There are clinical techniques like EFT. There are psychological techniques. There are metaphysical techniques. And so tonight we're going to talk about the metaphysical techniques aspect of it, and how I intended for folks to use that chapter in the book. So I'll put my glasses on as my realtor blows up my phone, because apparently he thought I meant I was going to be in class at 7 o'clock Chinese time. Okay, so there's a section in there that I recommend that I just kind of covered on understanding my vocabulary. And so instead of calling it delusion, because people sometimes get offended when I say that their thinking is delusional, although it is, and so is mine, and so is everybody's. That's what happens in a dualistic mind. So I call it chaotic data. So if the data is corrupted by fear, then it gets just like a computer gets corrupted if you introduce wrong data into a program, or wrong input. That's chaotic data. And so at the foundation is the idea that source, by whatever name you call it, the god, the goddess, the divine intelligence, creative power, always accepts whatever you believe, because source is allowing us to work through our shit, in the simplest of terms, allowing us to learn the lessons we chose to learn in this lifetime. So there is no oppressive God that's saying you got to do this, you got to do this. you're writing your adventure. This is the choose your own adventure experience. That's, that's why I like to say that it's very holographic, because you can have all of these weird things and that happen in your life, and you can survive them, or you may be somebody who doesn't. Maybe that's the path that you've chosen. So the first thing I want to underscore is, whenever you experience any kind of affliction, and whenever somebody that you know, having been exposed to this information, experiences affliction, please don't let that become a place of a point of placing blame, not on yourself for having had you didn't do anything wrong to experience an affliction. And please, 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 more than anything else, don't say that to another person. That's one of the most violent things you can do. To say, as Louise Hay said, to that young man, you're not doing the work. First of all, nobody has the right to make a claim like that, because they don't know. She didn't know what work he was doing. She didn't know what lesson he was here to learn. And then the second half of that, like I said a little earlier, is recognizing that our thought creates the conditions. In the beginning of the Stigolaria 101 course, we talked about how all we do as witches, as magical practitioners, as sorcerers, is work with the energy around a person, a situation, a thing, or an experience, and we shift the energy. So energy can't be created or destroyed. It simply is. And if that's the case, then when what's happening in your body is energy manifesting in a particular way, you can shift that energy. It's not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something that you can simplify by saying, oh, well, because my thought resulted in this, then all I have to do is change my thought and the disease goes away. That's not how it works. Once it's manifest in your body, now you have another lesson, another thing to have to get under your belt, another tool to accumulate. So think of it, although I'm not a gamer, so for anybody who's gamers, excuse me if I'm guessing this wrong and I'm making it up as I go along. But from what I understand from watching my gamer friends, imagine that you're on this adventure and you're playing the game, and along the way you have to pick up all the different magical tools. And the more magical tools you have, the better your outcome's going to be, because when you're confronted with something, now you have a tool. So there may have been some things that you did early on in the game that puts you at a slight disadvantage, so your points are lower than the other players. Think of that as being chaotic data. You made a bad decision based on fear, based on inaccurate information. And so now you lost a couple points, or maybe you just didn't move ahead points and everybody else is further ahead. But then while they're all further ahead, you notice a little sparkly, shiny thing behind a rock, and you go and pick it up, and it's a shield of amazing power. And when you catch up with those people, or maybe you don't even catch up with them, maybe they all got slaughtered by the monster. And when you confront the monster, now you have the shield of amazing power. You get to move through that experience to the next level. So again, I apologize if that's not how games work. I'm basing it on Dungeons and Dragons because I know how that works. So, so that's kind of the context of that idea of source believes or accepts whatever it is that you believe. And so if you think right now that like, for example, in my case, if I think I have AIDS rather than my body is experiencing AIDS for the last 40 years, then I'm making AIDS mine. I'm owning it. And there might be a reason that somebody legitimately wants to claim disease for themselves. I don't know what it is. I'm open to the possibility that there could be a reason. Maybe they want to deconstruct the disease, so they have to own it to control it. So that's why we don't judge people. But for me, I can't do that. So for me, my way of deconstructing was to say AIDS stands for anger incorrectly directed at the self, because I think that's what all cancer comes from. Cancer is science is finding out more and more every day that cancer is bacterial, that there's a bacterial link and imbalance in our bodies, and particularly in our guts, that allows the situation to be right for messed up cells to reproduce. And if you just use that as a metaphor for everything else in your life, if you have a bad relationship, it means that stuff was messed up in your guts, and which is, where your mind actually exists, and you allowed unhealthy cells to reproduce in that relationship. That became resentment, that became a desire to cheat, that became whatever. If you're stealing, or let's go from beginning to end on a circumstance that could lead to disease. A person feels like they're oppressed, like they can't catch a break, and they never have enough money to put food on the table for their kids and for themselves. So they feel that the only thing they can do is go to the store and steal that food. Now, first, I always like to say, when I use this example, if you ever in your life see somebody stealing food, don't say a thing about it. And really think about that. Nobody steals food because they don't need it. They steal food because they're hungry. So that first you back where? That puts you back in a place of love. But that person is operating out of fear because they think they got to get theirs because, society, the man, the system, the patriarchy isn't going to let them get theirs. And so they've been disempowered. And that's what society, that's what the patriarchy wants. They want people disempowered. That's why they say, don't read those books. Don't listen to that person talk. Don't, we're going to execute the Malcolm X's of the world. We're going to execute the Thich Nhat Hanh's of the world. That's why, because if you listen to information that empowers you, it endangers the power structure that oppresses you. That's the big difference between folk magic and pop culture, Wicca and all of that. Now, Wicca and all of that also reclaims their power, but they reclaim their power and then apply it to a patriarchal system of hierarchy and gender. So that person stole. Now they go home, they feed their kids, they feel good for, a half an hour, maybe a day. And then they feel guilty because they were taught stealing is wrong. And they were taught that bad things happen to people who steal. And that guilt creates a tension in their system. And that tension in their system, first of all, shifts everything in their body, but it also shifts everything in their house. Every relationship they have, it shifts, it affects everything. It's all energy. And so realizing that everything has shifted, now things don't feel safe. So now the seeds of fear are starting to take root, or starting to germinate. And then that tension might result in really bad headaches. And those really bad headaches might come from a place where you think, gosh, I'm a bad person. And bad things happen to bad people. And, this is what I operated from, a place of darkness, because we were racially biased into thinking that anything that's dark couldn't possibly be the shadow that's a part that without which we couldn't have light, and is both a part of who every one of us is. So now we fear darkness. So now you've not only planted the seeds of fear, now fear has also become racism, and it could be really subtle. I mean, you could have those racist ideologies in your head and be dark skinned. And we see it we see evidence of it in society. But let's say, I'm trying to find the page. I just dropped the what do you call it? I dropped the bookmark. Well, I'll go from memory on this. Now those tension headaches could become migraines, and migraines get triggered by the light. So now you're putting yourself in a place of darkness. Well, if you don't already embrace your darkness, the shadow that allows you to say, you know what, I just took care of my kids. I did what my responsibility as a parent is, and there's nothing wrong with having done that. We're in a broken society, and in a broken society, sometimes you got to break the rules. that migraines could turn into something else, could turn into an imbalance in the body, in the gut, the digestive system, because let's face it, the person who feels guilty about stealing is probably also not digesting the food that they just ate, and there becomes a bacterial imbalance in the body. Once that bacterial imbalance is in the body, it can, as a physician, I can tell you, it can turn into a cancer. And now what you have to do when you treat, so there's the progression of disease and the manifestation of disease. Well, then you don't come to the table and say, okay, I'm just going to utter this spell or do this working, or, take these herbs to change the way that I think, because that's an important part. We do have to shift that, but you shift that while you address the outcome of, because everything you do is magical. So when she was thinking, or he was thinking, that they were a bad parent, that's a magical spell. And that'll start to manifest in their lives if they don't correct it. Then they might become a bad parent. If they think that they're a bad person, then the universe hears them saying that they're a bad person, and it's going to provide evidence for whatever it is that we truly believe, because it's all delusion, it's all perception, everything's an illusion around us. And so now you have to not only treat the metaphysical cause, and I give examples in the book of a bunch of different afflictions to kind of give you an idea. I do recommend that there are like some really good books out there by New Thought practitioners who've taken Louise Hay's seminal work and made it a little less judgy. That can be very useful. Even Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life is a good resource tool. But just understand not to bring that guilt in, because if you bring the guilt in, now you have another affliction to resolve. I hate to tell you, that becomes a cycle in itself. Now, some doubt might arise, and doubt arrives because we're not 100% rooted in love yet. There's still some fear. And so if you just said, the first thing I'm going to do, and this is my own personal approach, the reason 40 years after being diagnosed with AIDS and being told I was going to be dead in 24 months or less, is the first thing I attacked was fear. And so releasing the fear, and then saying, what are the lessons? Why am I having this experience? Now, I didn't blame myself for getting raped. I didn't ask to get raped. And it wasn't even my fault that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I also I think this is a big piece I always try to figure out, because I've lost so many absolutely beloved to this disease, that I want to figure out what it is that made my thought process different, because some of them were taking this approach too. But I also didn't blame the assailants, because I took time to look and say they were being abused by the police, and they were being targeted because they were considered unwelcome in this country. And so they thought they were striking back at a cop because I happened to be wearing a security guard's uniform. So I let go of the blame, because blame comes from a place of fear. And I just said they made bad decisions, and their bad decisions hurt me. The onus is on them for having made the bad decisions, but it's not my job to mete out justice or anything else in that way. I did my working that justice be real, that justice be meted out, but that the person's responsible, or systems responsible for those men being so hurt that they hurt me in that way, that was my objective. Not to get them, not for those men to go to jail, for those men to never feel like they had to assault somebody again, and to find a home in this country, in South Florida, where we're about to see things like that happen all over again, I fear. And yeah, I'm mindful of what I just said. So my working tonight, this is how you take this and make it practical. Be real with who you are. Don't try to be airy-fairy, like, oh, yes, this is going to happen, and if the toxic positivity isn't going to get you anywhere. Try to stay positive, but then allow yourself to say the things you fear out loud, and then make note of them. Now, I have a steel trap of a mind. So when I sit down at night, there are 3 things I've said during the course of the day today that I've expressed. I fear this. I fear that, because I don't want to manifest it. But I know that I've spoken it, and I've spoken from a place of fear. So tonight, guess what? I'm not going to be working on finding the perfect house. I'm not going to be working on keeping Miami safe, because I don't want the energetic expense of having to control a bunch of, yahoos, on Tuesday at the courthouse in Miami. But what I can control is me, and I can release that fear and know that calm abiding is a possibility, and that all of us are one. So the more of us that stay in that place of calm on Tuesday and not fear, the better the outcome is going to be on Tuesday. And so the same thing with illnesses, the same thing with a job loss, the same thing with a dear friend came to me and said, I'm afraid I might be possessed because this evil spirit seems to have attached itself to me when they had this bad experience. And I said, well, the first thing we need to work on then is the fear, because there is nothing outside of you. So if you're experiencing something dark, she, was seeing something dark in the corner of her room. I said, is it possible that's your shadow? And she's like, no, this is even when the room's dark. And I was like, there's nothing darker than your shadow. Your shadow is a part of you. And it seems to be standing on the other side of the room because you're not letting it be part of you. What would happen if you every night you welcomed it to take one step closer? And so that's the process that they're in right now. But that's how we embrace the things that we fear. Because if you try to run away from it, I absolutely promise you that it's going to manifest in bigger and bolder and sometimes more detrimental ways. The only way to heal fear is to move through it. You have to get into the heart of it. That's why I say that magical practice is messy. It's dirty. Your sleeves have to be rolled up, and you have to be willing to get dirty if you're going to get the kind of powerful outcomes that you get. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't show people me physically doing magical practice, because a bunch of people would get scared off and never try. You don't have to do what I'm doing after 50 years in the practice, but know that after 50 years in the practice, you're going to be really comfortable with getting dirty, because you're just like, if you've ever seen a person who's a potter, they are a mess by the time they make a beautiful piece of pottery. And that's what we're doing with magic, is we're creating a beautiful new creation. And as we create the creation, just like when you're doing pottery, the imperfections show up, and you have a choice of either just embracing that imperfection for that moment, or, excuse me, or doing whatever it is that they do when the it's not dough, clay is spinning around on the wheel, to fix that imperfection. And so our practice is about fixing those imperfections, those flaws, in our way of thinking, the chaotic data. And there's, I've given in the 101 course and in the advanced course a lot of ways to do that. The one command is a good way to do that. If you think that looking at the esoteric or spiritual or metaphysical causes of disease is too much for you right now, then just use a formulary approach, where you could either do the formulary approach of the construct, the formula of a spell with recognition of essential unity, declaration, gratitude, and release, or you can just use something like the one command by Astara Lovejoy. And that is to say, I don't know how I live a long and healthy life with full-blown AIDS. All I know is I do now, and I'm grateful. And that's, if that was the only spell that you ever pronounced, you would live, and I'm proof. If I got fantastic news this week when I was hospitalized because I was having like really excruciating pain underneath my rib. I sensed I knew what it was, but I also have a responsibility to the people I take care of to make sure that everything is still good with my heart and my stents and all that stuff. So we called the ambulance because I can't drive. And The ambulance came, they did an EKG. They said, we're going to take you to the hospital just in case. I said, I have a sense I know what this is. This is a bile issue. I'm going through something. This house hunting process is not my favorite thing to do. Like there's many more important things I could be doing with my time, or that I prefer to do. I said, but yeah, let's check it out. They did another EKG. It was fine. Then they did a full workup, and the doctor came in and said, if I didn't have your medical record, if your heart surgery wasn't done in this facility, I would not believe you that you had 3 stents and that you've had 3 major heart attacks. I wouldn't believe you that your Parkinson's is so, you're so far down the road with Parkinson's. I definitely wouldn't believe that you had full-blown AIDS, because he said, I've never seen anybody this far into those 3 diseases, let alone seizure, epilepsy, for my whole life, function like you. He said, you're a miracle. And I said, thank you. So are you. Because that's the truth, because that's how you do it. It's not, there is nothing special about me that anyone else doesn't have. The only thing that separates me or any other practitioner who does this from the ones who don't is the access to that information. And that's why I'll spend every last breath I have giving anybody who wants it access to this information. That's why I'll never consider my practice private or closed. I will incur the agita of the wrath of my ancestors who still fight me on this, which, by the way, they don't anymore, because now they see what we've been able to do just in our own family by saying that closed practice my ass. This is, somebody taught us and somebody taught them and somebody taught them, and this is information that's age old. And I'm sorry, I'm not doing the egotistical closed practice stuff. If you come from that place and recognize that not everybody's ready for it, so it's not like I'm not going to go on Facebook and teach the deeper stuff that y'all get freely. I really want to, don't get me wrong, but I know that I'm not going to, because I know that could be really messy and problematic for some people. And then this information, you have to, for those who are struggling with mental health issues in the school, as well as anyone that you might be sharing this information with to try and help them, recognize that mental health afflictions are the very same thing. So there was an incident or a series of incidents or some beliefs that caused an imbalance. That imbalance, and by the way, I truly believe that, because I don't believe that human life occurs until after birth, that fetus is not an independent being and person until they're born. So some of these messed up beliefs are transferred generationally while you're still in the womb, and so they're part of the physiology of the birther, of the mother, and then that becomes a part of you, because there's no difference between you and your mother or you and your father. We're all the same stuff. And so some of it might not have even been your mother's chaotic data. It might have been your grandmother or your great-grandmother, your grandfather, your great-grandfather. That's how generational trauma gets passed down. And that's why we have to, an element of this healing always has to involve our ancestors. So you find out sometime when you're going through this that like I found out that my grandfather, my dad's dad, had thalassemia major. And I found it out because I was diagnosed with thalassemia minor and I didn't have any symptoms. They were just saying, oh, well, I mean, there's some clinical symptoms in my lab work. And thalassemia is a Mediterranean version of, not really of hemophilia, but like closer to say Tay-Sachs disease or sickle cell anemia. But it's a different malformation of the cell. And I found out more about my grandfather, who died when my dad was 16, who isn't an active speaker in my work with the ancestors. He's more of a viewer. He'll sit back and watch, and he'll give support, but only to a certain extent. Well, I found out a reason why so much of that happened was because he had this disease that made him a very weak child. And so as a weak child, he believed he was weak. He believed he was powerless. And as he became an adult, rather than healing that, he compensated or overcompensated by being loud and pushy and like extreme, like the machismo thing. And so I finally understood why my dad was so meek and had a disdain for all things pushy and butch and um, violent in that toxic masculinity kind of way. So we do this healing on ourselves, and it heals our ancestors. And and that's why I say that that's such an important part of our work. We do this healing on ourselves. It heals the people that are around us, whether they're people around us that are of blood, or people we're in a relationship with, or people who are just around us. Like, we changed the tone in our building. And I'm convinced this has to be the reason why I'm in this insidious apartment, is that when we got here, the neighbors were all conflicted with some weird ass drama, each one, different ones, like different dramas in different families. And it was so chaotic and it was so annoying that the first thing I did was esoterically smudge and then really cleanse the whole property. And we would do it like, Craig would like say, like, somebody's going to figure out what you're doing. Because I'd go over and talk to those neighbors, and I might have a little bit of black salt in my pocket, and be sprinkling it on their, the area where all of their drama's happening, or other things that I did. And we were working on ourselves, and I said, Craig, none of this is going to go away until we're okay with us. So, like, I have to forgive blah, blah, blah that you did. You have to forgive yourself for doing blah, blah, blah. I got to forgive myself for the things that I've done. And anytime we've had conflicts, we have to we have to bury them right now and realize that those conflicts were just both of us coming from a different place. But either place, wherever your place was, because I don't like to tell somebody where they are, wherever your place was, it definitely wasn't love. And wherever my place was definitely fear, because I can always speak to, I've yet to, when there's times I want to deny it, but when I really do the work, it always comes down to fear. And that makes this work the easiest work and the hardest work at the same time, because it's hard to face your fears. It's hard to admit that something got off balance in your mind and then became off balance in your body and then got even bigger. But if you think about the story from the Palestinian rabbi who said, if you go to a town and those people treat you like shit, you need to leave that town and shake every speck of sand from your sandals and move on. And the reason for that metaphor was because if there was one speck of sand in ancient Palestine that was in your sandals, it could cause a boil. That boil, if left untreated, could become infected. That infection could cause gangrene. That gangrene could cause you to lose your leg, and it could spread throughout the entire body, and you lost your life. And there is no greater metaphor that I can think of in our lives with these afflictions. These afflictions are just opportunities. They're warning signals. Sometimes the only opportunity is sometimes a migraine is just to slow your ass down and force you to lay down and close your eyes. Sometimes nausea is just to make you in touch with the fact that there is something that's churning your stomach. So my way of framing all of this before we start our discussion is recognize that not only are there things that you can heal within yourself, things to let go of, the fears that you have to release that cause all of these things to be healed, but knowing where certain things are that we were actually confused by language about, like your heart. If I ask everybody where their heart is, they're all going to say, oh, my heart's right here. And no, that's the organ that we call your heart. But your actual heart itself is right here. It's 2 to 4 inches over your head. When we say my mind, oh, well, my mind's right here. No, that's your brain. Your mind is actually in your gut. And why I say that is when you met the love of your life, or one of the loves of your life, or the love of the moment, where did you get butterflies? You didn't get it in your brain. When somebody that you love dies, it doesn't feel like somebody kicked you in the head. It feels like they kicked you in the gut. And biologically speaking, the serotonin in your body that gives you that sense of well-being, that makes you happy, that keeps you from being depressed, is everybody's always thought it's in your brain, because people with Parkinson's take carbidopa, levodopa to create the dopamine. But the dopamine's actually create that you take it, yes, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier to send the signals to the signaling molecules. But the process of that dopamine and serotonin being created is in your gut. And there is an axis that goes between your gut and your brain. There's an energy center that travels, and it's physio. Science knows this. Science has a term for what's happening on the gut-brain axis. So when you understand that too, you learn to trust your gut more. And like little simple things, like anytime there's an upset in my stomach over something, then I know that that's my gut literally telling me something. And so I'll do a reading, or I'll throw some fava beans, or I'll do something to put me in touch with, a clearer message quickly from the ancestors. Now, for me, it's always Scopa cards are just the easiest way to do it, because there's no bullshit. I don't have to like get into the flowery, poetic, and beautiful language of tarot and then interpret it. Scopa cards just flat out tell you, like, bitch, you ain't listening. You could throw cards 3 times in a row. The difference of the cards is still going to tell the same exact story. And I had a friend here a couple of weeks ago, and we did that because she was not. She wanted a tarot reading. We did a tarot reading. She was spending the weekend, and I was like, do I have permission to go deeper with you? She said yes, and I said, all right. You may be really uncomfortable with this, and you might even get mad. Please don't leave. It's really late at night and we're all stoned. But I'm gonna throw Scopa cards for you, and I'm gonna show you something. So I threw the Scopa cards, and I was like, see, the Scopa cards are saying the same thing that I said, that you said you would interpret those cards differently. That's why it's so much fun doing a reading for a reader. And I was like, you asked for a reading. You didn't ask to interpret the cards. So let me do the reading. And then I did the Scopa reading. It was the same thing. I said, now, what would happen if I left those 3 cards out of the picture and we shuffle again and throw 3 more cards? And I threw 3 more cards, and they said the same thing. And I was like, don't believe me. It's in the book. So get your book, open it. And as I'm doing the reading, you'll see. And we did 3 readings. And she's like, okay, I get it now. And I was like, it's not that I wanted to disagree with you. It's that the ancestors want you to get this lesson and know that you're okay and let go of that fear, because most of our fears come from, when I say chaotic data, it's experiences that we may or may not have remembered correctly. And the reason we may or may not have remembered them correctly is because we may or may not have seen them correctly, because you only have one place for perception. It's from you looking at the situation. We don't have without using meditative skills and journey work, you don't have the instant ability to say, let me see what that looked like from behind them, from the person that I had the interaction with looking at me. And trust me, when you do that in journey work, sometimes you find out that the person that was really just behaving really badly toward you wasn't behaving badly towards you. They were reacting to you. And you were the one behaving badly. And you just didn't know it because you were in a place of fear. There was no malice on either part, but there was fear being expressed, and it wasn't being expressed in a healthy way. So hopefully that made sense to you. And if there's any questions that you have, or anything you want to add that your experience has taught you, or that you just want to discuss, open up your mics and let's talk about it.
Something that I was curious about when I was reading this chapter, there's a part where there's a list of the different afflictions, and you talk about a little bit about what it is and then how to address it. So, something that you said about anxiety, it said something like anxiety comes from a lack of trust in the flow or the process of life.
Right.
I was wondering what you would say depression is if you were, and maybe you haven't, I'm sure you've thought about it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't in the book. So
Yeah.
it might be bigger
It
than,
it was intentionally not in the book, but that's a fantastic question and one that I actually intended to cover tonight. So thank you, because it slipped my mind. The reason I didn't include it in the book was because it is a bigger topic. It is actually part of the coming course in the fall, because we're going to be showing how to tackle that from multiple angles and how to be open to the multiple causes, often trauma related, for depression. But depression is it comes next in the chain from anxiety. So unresolved anxiety becomes depression, because it reaches, it's a fear that's reached a place of thinking there's nothing I can do about this. We never get depressed about something we think we can fix. We can get sad about it, we could be disappointed in it, but when we're depressed, it's because we think we have no power over it. And so it's unresolved anxiety. So you reverse engineer, which is what we're going to do in the new course. You magically reverse engineer the experience with where you're at now, and go backward. And so that's a really great place to end, to insert a little ending to the lecture part. Is always if you always focus your magical workings, whether for you or somebody else, on where they are right now. And so that means that somebody can't come to you and say, to some of these folks who offer magical services, and they say, oh, I want a lover to come back to me. One of the reasons I don't do public offerings of services is because there is a lot of work that goes into doing that kind of work. That's a full-time, that's just blessed work. Because the genuine practitioners are going to ask you questions. Tell me more about that. Why do you want that relationship back? Why didn't it work out? What happened? Talk to me, first, because they're trying to find out where that person is right now. And they're listening to the ancestors while they're asking those questions. They're listening to their ancestors and their orishas, or their spiritual court, because and it's the reason why people I would just give an example of a friend who I think is one of the most effective practitioners in his region, Sen Elias. I don't know if all of you know him, but he's an amazing practitioner, and really does the work. And the reason he's so amazing and his outcomes are so, astoundingly accurate, is because he meets the person where they are. He doesn't try to change them. He uses magic to heal where they are now and bring it to the next place. Then his next working is to heal where they are now. So any magical practitioner who says they're going to fix a serious problem for you in one go, I've yet to meet a person who's got that skill. Now they may do one go and it's 8 hours long of work. That's not one go. That's I promise you, if they're doing 8 hours of work, as I've done frequently, that's why I say it takes a lot out of you to do that for strangers, because you got to establish the connections, and you've got to go deep, and you've got to make sure that you've got to understand where their intentions are and be clear about it, so that you're not inflicting more harm, and so that you're not opening yourself up to self-harm by making yourself crazy over something that doesn't exist. If you're trying to heal something that doesn't exist, you're spending all that energy, and you're going to feel depleted at the end. And a lot of times when we do that, I'll say, if somebody's working for themselves, I'll say, so you were working on healing your relationship. Is it really your relationship you're trying to heal? Or are you looking for permission to allow that chapter to close and move on to a place that's healthier for you? Are you, because you're not going to change the person who was abusing you, but you can change you. And that may have an impact on that person, But sometimes in a situation like that, the safest place for you to be is not with them. Let them work out their shit. And so you have to start with where you are at any point in your magical practice, whether it's for healing an affliction, or, and let's face it, everything in that entire book is an affliction. That's why I put that chapter at the end. And that's why if you look at the last 3 chapters, they're really all one chapter. The editor had the presence of mind to break that up for me and say, no, this can't be one chapter. You need to take these steps that you're taking and put a an end to that chapter, so people think about that step, and put an end to the next step so people think about that, and then end with the afflictions. That's why we do what we do. And that's why if you look at the Maloikyo removal practice, it's about creating a safe place for healing to take place. And so 90% of what you're doing in that is, think about the act itself. It's creating that safe space energetically, and it's touching that person with love. You make the marks on their forehead. You're soothing them. You put your hand on their head, you're soothing them. You hold their hands, you're soothing them. So that's why it's hard for me to say that there's a difference between magic and healing, because I don't know how else healing takes place except through magic. And magic and psychology is just magic in your head. Like it's more thought out magic. But that's why Jung was so clear that the entire process of working with the human psyche and the brain is a magical process. And you can't, the person who is not open to those kinds of things, like I won't say a person who's atheistic, because I'm really non-theistic. I don't say atheistic because I do believe that there are beings that other people call the gods and goddesses, and who are some of whom are part of my spiritual court. I just think there's a difference between the mythology and actually working with them. And so I'm not atheistic, because I know that these entities exist. Some of them are really disappointed in the way that we bow and scrape to them. It's not what they want. They want the relationship. But if for the person who says metaphysics doesn't exist at all, this is all mumbo jumbo, it's all in your head, that person always has the hardest time healing. There's always something in their life. If you look at an entertainer, a comedian that I really like, Ricky Gervais, he struggles with a lot of things in his life because he doesn't believe that there's anything other than science. And his view of science has not expanded to include metaphysical science. And that's a tough place for a person to be. I guarantee you there's woundedness somewhere there. There's probably religious trauma somewhere there, that his reaction to that is to say, nope, I don't want to hear anything spiritual. So what do? You do the work when you have somebody in your life that's like that. You do the work on you and releasing the fear, and think of when was it that you felt like that? When did you almost say, you know what, I'm dropping out of this course because I just think metaphysics might be bullshit, and maybe I just need to go see a shrink. And maybe you do. Sometimes you got to listen to those things too. Maybe you do have to get some more mental health support. But when you take things from a holistic perspective, just focus on you. Focus on, when did I do that? And when you remember, oh yeah, I remember I went through blah, 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 and I had that same thing, and look at it. It may be that initially that experience caused anxiety, and that anxiety went untreated. It became depression. That depression just really got deep. And then the only way you could figure to get out of it was to cut off your spirituality, or cut off that relationship, or cut off that job. And so all you do to fix that years in the future is, because now maybe you're 60 years old and you're not going to go back to pole dancing, but that pole dancing would have been like great exercise for you. And you're 60 years old and fat like me. And, so what do? You forgive yourself for when you made that mistake. You forgive yourself and say, that really sucks. I'm sorry that I didn't believe enough in myself. and that I allowed that religious trauma to hurt me so bad, and I'm not preaching like from a better than anyone perspective, because I've been through that. That's why I know really well how that works. When priests molest you as a teenager, it's really easy to say, fuck the church. But when you say, you know what, I forgive myself for ever having thought that that was my fault, that I brought that on. Yes, I was a little queer kid who thought that some of my abusers were cute, because they were, but they were also monsters. And it wasn't my fault that they did that. I was 13, 14 years old. So you heal that in the future. Like, most of us don't have the brilliance to think of that when we're 13, 14, 15, 20, 25. It may be when we're in our 40s, 50s, or 60s that we realize, and we say, you know what? I forgive myself for thinking that was my fault, because that was not my fault. That wasn't my decision. There was nothing I could have done to have changed that circumstance. And so I let it go. And those are the times I use the one command, because it is the quickest way. It's the shortcut. I don't know how I heal from my sexual trauma. All I know is I do now, and I'm grateful. I don't know how I heal from my religious trauma. All I know is I do now, and I'm grateful. And I'll tell you, doing this practice brings that stuff up again and again and again. I recently, through working with one of the members of our community, with whom I'm very close, was struggling against the contemplative order of compassion continuing, because it's just not my thing. Like I know that the IRS requires you to be a church, but I bristle at the word church, and I'm well aware of why I bristle. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to protect these women's reproductive rights and gender affirming care and sexuality and all of these things that Ron DeSantis is screwing with, and all over the country others are starting to do. And then in this conversation with this person, I said, I know this is coming from my religious trauma, because religion has no ability to hurt me. People hurt me in the past. The religion didn't. The beliefs might have, but we're creating something new, and it's going to allow women, like we've already helped 8 women have access to mifepristone, and we've already helped a number of people find connections. We didn't have to pay for these, but connections to places where they can get gender affirming care, and we're friends of the order. We'll take them and their partner, or them and their mom, or them and their dad in, so that they can get the gender affirming care that the kids, in this case, they were children, they were minors, need. And so if I walked away from doing that, that's a pretty selfish and messed up place to be, when I have the ability to resolve that suffering for somebody. And so we had this conversation, me and this other faculty member, and they said, you always say, feel the fear and do it anyway, move through the fear. What would happen if you move through the fear? I was like, oh, I'll be in a pretty pissed off mood for about 3 or 4 days, but then I'll finally get to the root of it. So that's what I did, was push through. And that was actually at the time that the last class, it just so happened that like nobody was showing up at the classes. That was freeing up a little of my time. And then I just said on the last class, I'm going to record it. And tonight I'm going to let things get messy with my spiritual practice, so that we either come out of this ready to move forward with a contemplative order of compassion or not. And where I either let go of the fact that keeping the school open right now is coming out of my pocket, and it's a real heavy ask for me financially, or I let go of it and let it become what it becomes. Do you know, on Monday or Tuesday of this week, I don't remember which, this past week, right after we were done with the decision that the class wasn't going to be, it was going to be tonight, I got a message from Google Grants, and Google Grants has awarded us $10,000 a month of ad credits, like it's not physical cash, wish it was, but $10,000 a month in free advertising to build the school and to build the order. And there was the answer. I mean, if I use those, if I use those credits, I want to see his, I'm gonna looking like I'm going to see his face. Oh, how cute. But if I use those credits, it'll build the school. It'll help us get the word out about helping women and transgender persons. And anyway, that's the sort of the cycle of health, of healing those afflictions. So you could be doing this for 50 some years and 55 years, and I promise you, there's still going to be another opportunity to heal some shit. Who else? Allison, you could open your microphone. I don't care if they're barking.
There's two of these things.
They do look like a handful,
Oh,
and they look so it's so tempting. Oh my God.
Say hi.
That's Shayna Punham.
that's Tonka. And
Hi, Tonka.
Oh, yeah.
And who's
That's
this?
Scout. This is
Hey,
Scout. Scout, say hi. Say hi.
why are you annoying
He's
me,
got
Mom?
one blue eye. Oh my God, there's so much work.
You see,
As
they
I
appreciate it.
put my shawl on because I was cold, they almost pulled me and the shawl off the chair.
So was there
Oh.
anything you wanted to add or ask?
This book was phenomenal. It really gave me
Oh.
such a very different perspective. It's funny because there's so many phrases you say and so many things you refer back to that I felt like I was the only one that ever. You're talking about Pokino. Nobody knows what Pokino is, but it took me back to so many things when I was younger with my grandparents and my parents. And there's so many things that you brought up that I'm looking at now that I never looked at it that way. I never thought like what my grandmother was doing, but seeing now, I'm like, oh my God, that's what she was really doing.
Yeah.
So it was just, this was really one hell of a book.
Thank you so much. Oh, that just
No,
I'm so
really.
grateful. This book was a joy. Like most books will be a joy and a pain in the ass to write. And midway through, or maybe 2/3 of the way through every other book I've written, I've always been like, oh, I'm not writing another book. This one, I didn't have that feeling. Like I really did feel like this should be my last book, because how could I possibly write something more than what I've just poured into this? But I felt it was such an easy thing, and I can't take credit for it really, because this is a work that is an absolute tribute to my ancestors.
Right.
There is nothing in that book that intentionally, there's nothing in that book that really comes from me, because I wanted this to be them. I wanted their voice to be remembered. Somebody else could write something about what I taught. This was like important. I think the next book's going to be what did I take from this material and how do I apply it in the postmodern world? That'll be the next book. And that'll be the next course.
Yeah. It really does, definitely, because it brought me back to so many memories when I was younger, and really all of my grandparents and my parents and my aunts and uncles. It really did do that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You hit
That's
it.
so exciting.
100%.
I'm so pleased. That makes me really
I'm
happy.
glad. No, it was good.
And
I mean, it wasn't
eh,
one chapter that you could say, oh my God, I'm glad I'm done with it. Like every chapter was, you look forward to it.
Thank you. Well, the 23rd anniversary of Zio Leo's passing is coming up in a couple weeks. So I take that as the best tribute that I could possibly make to him, because he was the bridge between the old ways of our practice that nobody was supposed to talk about. He was the key that said, because what he did was he took Wicca and threw Italian seasonings on it to make an Italian relatable version of Wicca, because he loved Wicca, and he freely said that. And that gave the rest of the family agita, because they were like, oh, why are you going to do all this ritual stuff that's, that's so new agey and so, made up on bullshit stories. And it's like, how do we know that our entire stories aren't bullshit either? That's what storytelling is. And so he was the one that, when I was 16 years old, made me say, you know what? I mean, Wicca didn't feel like it was for me. But the thing about being public felt like it was for me. Like that was the only way. Somebody else could be authentic and be in a closed practice. I'm not saying that that's not authentic, but I knew I couldn't be. But somebody else could do that. And so when I talk about in the old book, in the Magic at the Crossroads, when they wanted me to become the high priest, the other side of the family wanted to be the high priest of their boschetto. I didn't want that, because I said, look, I just walked away from an esoteric Catholic church, and you want me to join just a pure older version of esotericism, but it's all worship related, and that takes me away from healing people. Like I love that side of the family and what they do, and I love the rituals of the boschetto. They're beautiful. But they're not, but because we understood that they weren't magical practices, that it wasn't witchcraft that we were practicing, and that was the worship that we were practicing, and that was their way of cultivating a relationship with those beings, with those deities. And so some people need the worshipful aspect to connect with their deities. I'm the kind of person who just like says, oh, I love you. I mean, the way that I watch people talk about their beautiful devotions to La Santissima, for example, does not even remotely look like my relationship, and they do all these like fancy little offerings and this and that. I came in tonight before the class and said, Mama, here's another Coke, because she loves Coca-Cola. And so I put a Coca-Cola on the altar. And before I leave my room, I always touch her feet and touch my lips. And I do the same thing to my mom and dad's picture. I treat them like they're my family, because they're my family, because they've been there for me when nobody else in the physical realm could even be there for me. But I see these rituals and I'm like, oh, that's so pretty. I wish I could do that. And I was like, the time I would take going through the ritual and reading and everything else, when I could just be talking to them about how much I love them and how much I appreciate they were there for me. And I came home from looking at houses today and said to her, thank you so much for keeping an eye out. If this was meant to be, Craig would have been happy with the house, and he wasn't. And so I know that you'll reach me, whether it's through my own mind or somebody else saying it. And so this feels, when Craig said no, I think it's too small, I think we'll be unhappy there. It was almost like I heard it in her voice, and I said thank you. So I approve. Hearing that from you just lets me know that I didn't miss the mark on this, on honoring the ancestors, because that's what they would say, and that's what they say all the time.
Absolutely. No, it really did, because it's just like sitting here and it just brings back so many different memories. And it's funny because I felt like I was the only one that ever heard these words, that they existed. And I was like, well, no, somebody else heard them, and they're using the same words that we use.
Yeah.
So it's just like so nice to hear.
Right on.
Really.
Ellen, I haven't chased you off in 3 years. So I think I might be doing something all right.
Yeah, all of the I can't thank your family enough for giving me what my family didn't. They did, but I didn't see it until you brought it to my attention, where those things were in my ancestral line, in my healing, in my journey to when we heal ourselves, we heal the ancestral line, and that means a lot to me, especially the life I've had up until now. And within the last 5 years, my whole perspective on what my life was is turning around to see it the way you explained it in this last chapter. The thing that stood out to me the most was at the beginning, when you were talking about investing your energy into the why me aspect. And that was me. I was, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why am I so sick? Why am I so tired? Why am I so I couldn't find an answer. And this makes complete sense to me. I'm not as tired anymore. I'm not as, I still have this physical things that manifested, but it's not as exhausting as it used to be. So there is, it works. I don't know how to explain it. I can't explain how it works for me. The things that I do, and a lot of the things that I do are the things that you've taught in this course and throughout all the courses. The one command, Ho'oponopono. Those are the easy steps when you're in a place where you can't get to physically or something, putting on a full ritual or
Right.
whatever you do, um, to actually bring yourself to a place to focus on those. Those are the easy steps. And then once you get through that, I find for myself that you do come back to it, and then you just take the next step, and you take the next step, and you take the next step. And that's, I can't thank you enough for what you've done for me. And
You
and
do
I see how
realize
it's affected my family in good ways and not so positive ways, but that was my misunderstanding that I have to take account to for my magic. And it's just been amazing. I can't thank you enough.
you realize that you don't have to make me cry at the end of every course I teach. It is absolutely acceptable to not not do that to me. That is why I made sure that you were the last ones that I asked. Um, thank you so much. I don't even have words for that. To see the growth that you've made in the last 3 years, and to end this course on that note when last week a former faculty member was telling me and actually having a conversation with other people as a means of getting customers that that I'm running a cult. And I was like, don't ever decide yourself to run a cult, because if you think what I'm doing is how you run a cult, you're going to fail.
I would have walked away a long time ago
This
if I
ain't how
thought
you
it was
do
real.
it.
It's not.
I promise you, if you try to run a cult this way, you're going to go broke. You're not going to have the fan base. This is not how you do it. But I would not do it a different way. I'm so grateful, and I can't say anything more because I'll cry. But thank you. We actually even finished 5 minutes early. I love and appreciate every one of you. That includes all of you that are watching on the replay. At some point in the summer, I will do another poll to ask what days and times work best for everybody, because I would like to, if at all possible, to have space that more people can be here for. I'm fine when it's just 3 or 4 people, because we get to dive a little deeper as well. But I miss seeing some of your faces. You know who you are, all of the rest of you that aren't here. It's a joy for me. I'll say it before I go on my, this is officially the beginning of the vacation, even though I have 2 more weeks of shows to do. This is such a gift to me, because I have never in my life, having taught academically and then taught metaphysically, I've never had classes that for 3 years, with the occasional person who pops in and then quickly leaves, have never had like a consistent group of people that never got on my nerves. And that is just so amazing to me. Like, that was a lesson for me, that when the right people are around you and you're not worrying about, I losing my ass on, financially on keeping the school open, but it is worth every dime of it, because I'm surrounded by people I love and who love me, and we're doing the work in our lives. And the rest of it will work out. The rest of it's working out as we speak. Look at just what happened this week. So thank you all, because I get as much, if not more, from this amazing freaking community than I could possibly give. So thank you, and good night to the 3 of you, and to everybody who's watching the replay. Love you. Take care. Oh, my mouse died. Let's see. There we go.